After making his WWE return last Saturday at Extreme Rules, we have an update on the creative plans for Bray Wyatt going forward, including former WWE stars, current WWE stars, and maybe even AEW stars linked to a WYATT6 faction. We're going to talk about that. Plus, Charlotte Flair is scheduled to return to WWE programming imminently. What's the latest on Cody Rhodes' recovery from injury? How are the USA Network feeling about Monday Night Raw nowadays? Vince McMahon's Netflix documentary, we've got an update on that. Soraya, we've also got an update on her talks with Triple H before signing with AEW. And what's the latest about Gable Stevenson? Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE, and I know we've already today done a WWE news story, but there's just so much going on right now, especially with tonight being Friday, especially Friday Night SmackDown on Fox, featuring the return of Bray Wyatt to the Blue brand. So there is so much to get into. Let's get straight into the first story, the biggest story of the day regarding Bray Wyatt and former and current WWE stars being rumored for a new stable being led by the former WWE Universal Champion. So, of course, Bray Wyatt made his return to WWE at the end of the Extreme Rules 2022 pay-per-view, or premium live event, should I say, to a chorus of holy you-know-what chants, and this was the first time that a live audience had seen the three-time world champion since Night 2 of WrestleMania 37 last year. The return also strengthened the rumors that Wyatt will once again have a faction surrounding him in WWE, as mysterious individuals wearing costumes resembling characters from Wyatt's previous Firefly Funhouse segments appeared in the crowd. Now, the stable itself is rumoured to be the WYATT6, of course. That's what a lot of people have been calling it. Of course, Bray Wyatt on social media, actually himself, has also been teasing. If you go to his profile page, you see the likes of Wyndham 6, etc. So certainly that's been linked into it, this WYATT6 stuff. And of course, I mentioned that plays into Wyatt's current name and the handle on Twitter too. Now, in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer seemingly has confirmed that the WYATT6 is in WWE's immediate plans and suggested several names that have been discussed to portray the various characters. These include at least two call-ups from NXT, one being Joe Gacy, who is currently leading a faction known as the Schism, and whose character has been frequently compared to Wyatt, as Huskus the Pig Boy, and Grayson Waller as Mercy the Buzzard, potentially identified by his Hawaiian shirt at Extreme Rules. There are also rumours that former Wyatt family member Eric Rowan will be playing Ramblin' Rabbit, though Meltzer emphasised that these are just rumours, while Bo Dallas, of course Wyatt's real-life brother, who is reportedly making his return to WWE, could be the person playing the Fiend himself. As for Sister Abigail, or Abby the Witch, who's been part of Wyatt's mythology since the character's beginnings, the names mentioned by Meltzer include Alexa Bliss, who famously transformed into a dark supernatural character aligned with Wyatt during his most recent run and then turned on him during his last WWE match, of course, and Liv Morgan, who also seemed to tease a darker side to her character when she smiled while being choked out by Ronda Rousey at Extreme Rules. Now, again, it must be said, these are just rumours, and we do have a little bit of spoilers here, so if you don't want to know truly what's going to happen with Bray Wyatt tonight on SmackDown, you can turn away now, or you can skip maybe a couple of minutes. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, we have some early Bray Wyatt creative plans for tonight on SmackDown, and Bray Wyatt is set to be a focal point of the show tonight on Fox. Fightful are reporting that the mask that they're bringing in for him to use is called an Uncle Howdy mask internally, which is quite curious because the phrase Uncle Howdy was recently trademarked by WWE too. There are also plans to have the abandoned Firefly Funhouse set aesthetic used on the show. That's all we know right now, so the mask is being called Uncle Howdy, which actually could be a new character for Bray Wyatt, and also they are going to revisit the abandoned Firefly Funhouse set. Now, circling back to this WYATT6 stable, this possible WYATT6 stable that's been rumoured, there was a tease when all of this White Rabbit stuff was going on about Malachi Black, Aleister Black possibly returning to WWE. And there was a hint, and it was actually in the HTML code of one of the White Rabbit teasers that featured the first two lines of Aleister Black's theme song, which certainly got a lot of people talking. Now, the future of Malachi Black, of course, has been a hot topic in the world of professional wrestling as of late, and according to the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, WWE indeed had been interested in bringing Black back to the company, but also bringing him back to be a part of the rumored WYATT6 faction that would be based around Bray Wyatt. Now, as I mentioned, Wyatt made his return at Extreme Rules, and it's led to plenty of speculation about what part he's going to play moving forward. And reportedly, the company had spoken about Black as an option for this faction. Of course, though, the former NXT champion is a leader of his own faction right now in AEW, but it had been reported that Black had been granted a conditional release from the company recently. This is what internally, or initially certainly, led to speculation that he could be headed to WWE, as the House of Black star was one of the AEW stars that WWE had contacted about potentially returning following the transition of power behind the scenes in World Wrestling Entertainment. However, Black is currently taking time away from the ring due to personal reasons. He did clarify via an Instagram video that he has not been released by AEW, therefore his immediate future does remain with All Elite Wrestling. During that announcement, the former Aleister Black said, quote, "I will see you guys in a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, with the wrestling world now just patiently awaiting his return to the ring. It will not be in WWE as Ramblin' Rabbit or anything like that. We've just spoken about some of the names that could possibly be linked." So that is certainly quite interesting, isn't it? That and again, I think Meltzer is just commenting on some of the rumors that are out there. I think again you have to be really careful when Dave Meltzer talks about WWE, because he throws in a lot of opinion, but a lot of the time it isn't necessarily factual. This WYATT6 faction is a possibility. As I mentioned, they're saying Huskers the Pig could be Joe Gacy, Sister Abby or Abby the Witch could be Alexa Bliss, Bo Dallas could be The Fiend, Eric Rowan could be Ramblin' Rabbit, and you could also have Grayson Waller being Mercy the Buzzard. I'm still not sure there is going to be a faction. I'm not convinced of that, because if that is the case, and again, this is just thinking about this from a pro wrestling point of view, if this is a WYATT6 faction, and these are all characters that are going to be surrounding Bray Wyatt, how are they going to work? Because at the end of the day, this is a pro wrestling show. It has to get to the point where they're going to wrestle. So you're telling me that Joe Gacy is going to wrestle as Huskers the Pig, unless these are people that Bray Wyatt has kind of brainwashed, if you will, into believing they're part of his group. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know if it's going to be a case like akin to almost a retribution, in that eventually they all unmask and reveal who they are. This is just the way to introduce them as being under the spell of Bray Wyatt. I'm not sure how they're going to go. Now, certainly, there are a lot of staples right now in WWE, right? There's Imperium, there's the New Day, there's the Brawling Brutes, there's Judgment Day, etc., etc. Damage Control, I could go on and on. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Bray Wyatt does have a faction, and certainly it's interesting to think of the identities that could be involved, but I do wonder how that would all work. Seemingly, though, we're going to get some answers tonight. I wouldn't hold out much hope to get a ton of answers, because the whole thing about the Bray Wyatt character is that he's very, very cryptic. But nevertheless, it's very exciting, and it's certainly a lot of fun to speculate as well. We've got a bit of an update as well about Charlotte Flair. Charlotte Flair, of course, has been away from WWE television for quite a while. Back in May, she lost an I Quit match to the current SmackDown Women's Champion Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania Backlash, during which Flair broke her arm in kayfabe, resulting in her taking time away from the ring. Shortly after the event, she married AEW star Andrade El Idolo, and therefore took additional time away from the company. Now, Flair has yet to reappear on WWE television, but now it appears her return is on the horizon. During the recent Extreme Rules Premium Live event, WWE aired a vignette teasing the return of the former women's champion, and now Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter has provided an update on Flair, noting the Queen is expected to return to the company soon. He said, quote, "Charlotte Flair is scheduled to return soon." Now, it must be said, soon is pretty vague. Soon could be tonight. Soon could be at an upcoming pay-per-view. Of course, you've got Crown Jewel. Soon could be Survivor Series. We don't know. So, again, we don't have an exact timeline. Little is known about what the plans could be for Flair upon her return. She is still currently listed as a member of the SmackDown roster. Thus, a return to SmackDown on the blue brand does appear to be somewhat likely. So, it'll have to remain to be seen. Looking just a little bit further forwards as to where she would reappear, the Raw looks pretty busy right now when it comes to the Women's Championship scene. You've got a lot of talent on that show, a lot of talent, especially when Becky Lynch returns. You could argue that she comes back and feuds with Ronda Rousey. Rousey is internally listed as a heel, and certainly they feel quite light on SmackDown for talent. But do I necessarily want to see Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey again as soon as Charlotte Flair returns? I suppose what would be interesting is a babyface Flair versus a heel Rousey. The issue is that, and this was the issue at WrestleMania, and this has always been the issue when those two are faced off, is that no one particularly wants to cheer either. Charlotte Flair is a much better heel than she is a babyface. She's just got that demeanor that people want to boo her. And again, there's no disrespect to her. There's no disrespect to her character, but people just want to boo her as opposed to cheer her. And if she came back and tried to work as a babyface opposed to Rousey, I think she could probably pull that off, because I think people would want to boo Rousey more than her. But then the discussion point would become, once again, Charlotte Flair's back, and wouldn't you know it, she's back competing for a championship, and then she can win that bout and then be champion for the 500th time. Nevertheless, you can't question her ability inside of the ring and her star power, and certainly that would be needed on SmackDown. Cody Rhodes. Do we have an update on Cody Rhodes and his return from injury? Of course we do, and an update has emerged regarding when the American Nightmare might be able to return from injury to WWE. Of course, Rhodes has been out of action since early June. He went through with his Hell in a Cell match against Seth freaking Rollins, despite suffering a torn pec in training just a few days before the event. Now, the injury put a stop to Rhodes' considerable momentum following his WWE return, and derailed any plans the company had for him following the 3 consecutive victories over Rollins. Now, fans have speculated that the return date for Cody will end up being January 28th at the Royal Rumble, but that's not set in stone. That's just speculation at this point and guesses by people involved. Now, in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer has revealed a bit of an update when it comes to Rhodes, and says that Cody is working ahead of schedule in terms of his rehabilitation, and while a return at the Rumble is definitely a possibility, actually prior to that, day one, the premium live event in early January, the first day of the year, could also be where the return takes place, due to it being set in Cody Rhodes' hometown of Atlanta. Meltzer had to say, quote, "Rhodes appears to be a little ahead of schedule in his healing. He's working with DDP. Things are normal for him in real life, but obviously any upper body weights he can use are extremely light. There's no firm date for his return this early, and even when there is, I would expect it to be kept quiet for a surprise pop. Originally, the idea of the Rumble looked good, perhaps day one since it's in Atlanta, and he grew up and still lives there." Of course, fans will be happy to see Rhodes is doing well. It must be said, a lot has changed since Cody Rhodes went away for his injury. So certainly it'll be interesting to see what the new regime in WWE has plans for the American Nightmare upon his return. One would speculate it's largely the same what the prior regime had. Cody Rhodes had a ton of momentum. He is a big star for WWE, and his comeback, if anything, will be just as big as his return. So I expect big things for Rhodes. Do I expect him to be at day one or the Rumble? I would probably say save it for the Rumble. I know they're trying to make day one a big thing. I know it's in his hometown, and people would say, wow, it's perfect timing. But the Rumble's different. It's classic. And Cody Rhodes as a surprise entrant, possibly winning the whole thing, would be a big deal. And I think he'd probably prefer that as opposed to a hometown return. Let's talk about Monday Night Raw and the USA Network. How are they feeling about Raw nowadays? Now, of course, following Vince McMahon's retirement in July, WWE has since seen a regime change. Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan are now the co-CEO of the company, while Paul Triple H Levesque has become the head of creative. He's the chief content officer of the company. Now, fans had speculated about Triple H taking over creative for years, and so far, it must be said, largely, he hasn't disappointed. There's been a lot of positive feedback about Triple H's first few months in charge of the creative side of things for WWE, and his time has been somewhat of a breath of fresh air for fans, and there has been attempts to put more focus on the in-ring competition, and certainly as well, things such as the mid-card titles. So it's interesting to look at how the USA Network have viewed WWE under the new regime. Now, Dave Meltzer in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter has actually shared an insight to the USA Network's thinking about the current version of Monday Night Raw. Meltzer said, quote, "The USA Network, which privately had been frustrated with Raw's ratings in recent years, particularly the period when the annual drop was so high, many years in a row, are thrilled now. Now, this week's edition of Raw drew 1.824 million viewers, which is the highest number since September 5th, following the Clash at the Castle events. Of course, intrigue was very high following Bray Wyatt's Extreme Rules return, and also the season season premiere of the show, and also the reunion of D-Generation X to close out the show. Largely, actually, the ratings have been somewhat similar to what they were last year during this drop-off period of Monday Night Football. I think the real interesting point will become once the football stops, once we head into the spring, and once we head into WrestleMania season. Prior to the NFL starting back up again, the Raw ratings actually became very strong for the first time in a while. They were doing over 2 million viewers, which is really unheard of for WWE in recent years. So I think the USA Network are looking at those numbers, not necessarily the numbers now, but looking at those numbers and saying, once the competition dies down, we can start to do some really impressive numbers. So keep an eye out for that. Vince McMahon, of course, he's got this Netflix documentary coming up. He's had a lot going on, it must be said. Now, there is a Netflix documentary, as I mentioned, regarding the life of Vince McMahon. And reportedly, it's been in the making for over 2 years, and it goes without saying that a documentary on Vince McMahon would be an interesting watch for all wrestling fans, especially given what's come out in recent months. Now, Dave Meltzer, in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, has given an update on the progress of the documentary. He said, quote, "What we know about the Netflix documentary on Vince McMahon is that it has been worked on for 2 years, and Vince himself made it clear he didn't want a puff piece on him, saying that would be boring. It was scheduled to be a 4-part series of 1-hour shows, but as you can imagine, with 2 years of work on such a project, it would be hard to cut it to that length, so we'll see, but there's no word on when it will be released." Now, certainly, I think the biggest point of contention is that it's going to be fascinating to see the extent to which the documentaries is going to be affected by the recent allegations, if they'll, if at all, cover it. I mean, if they're going to cover the life and story of Vince McMahon, certainly a big part of the story is somewhat the ending, not of his life, clearly, thankfully, but certainly the ending of his tenure with WWE. So you would think they have to cover it. If they don't, certainly Vice are going to, and that documentary, The 9 Lives of Vince McMahon, is set to debut in a couple of weeks' time. We spoke earlier today about Soraya, turning down WWE and choosing to sign with AEW instead. It was reported, as I mentioned yesterday, that she was offered a role by Triple H in the new regime. She ultimately passed as she joined AEW. She has since confirmed this on a podcast, Talk is Jericho with Chris Jericho. She confirmed these talks with Triple H and WWE, saying, quote, "Hunter did reach out to me and he wanted to talk to me. He thought it was my decision because he wasn't there at the time, the decision to leave. He thought it was my decision to leave. No, bro, it was Vince and Johnny. We got talking, but then I sat and talked to you guys and I was like, man, I miss that side of wrestling where you can pitch your own ideas and you can just have fun. I haven't felt excited about wrestling in a very long time, so the first day of being here, it was awesome. Everyone is so nice. It's crazy just how different it can feel." Now, when asked if she thought about returning to WWE, she said, quote, I was thinking about it. Again, I don't have issues with WWE. I just wish that some things were done differently, and it's the only thing I have against them. There are so many years where I could have been utilized more. My friends were around me. I was so depressed about it. I was thinking about going back there. Then I spoke to you, spoke to Mox, and I was speaking to Britt. I got off the phone with Tony, and he was so excited, and I was like, I think I'm going to give this a shot. Jericho said he implored Tony to reach out directly to Soraya as he thought she was close to returning to WWE. Quote, if you wouldn't have pushed it, I understand Tony is busy. He has 2 different football teams, British and American, and also this big company he has to run. I understand he's busy. A few months had gone by. I was like, I feel like he's not interested, and that's okay and totally fine. I was getting calls from WWE and was like, should I? Am I going to be 100% happy going back? Then you guys called me and made it sound so exciting. So certainly it would appear that the personal touch from the likes of Jericho, Moxley, and Tony Khan himself were enough to persuade Soraya to make I keep getting that wrong. Soraya to make that decision to sign with AEW. Finally, Gable, Stevenson, and Tiffany Stratton. We have an update on their status with WWE right now. According to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, Stratton has been dealing with an injury, which is why she's been out of action. She last competed at the end of August in a lights out match to Wendy Chu. The Wrestling Observer newsletter is reporting that she suffered a head injury. That's not accurate. She was written off of television with a head injury, but her absence can be largely seen on social media. I don't need to go into that. As for Gable Stevenson, He has begun participating in practice matches at WWE's Performance Center in Orlando. His training was put on hold after recently undergoing a heart procedure. It was discovered last year that the Olympic gold medalist had Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, which is considered fairly rare of a condition that causes fast heartbeats. Of course, he signed with WWE in September of last year. He was drafted to Raw. He was last seen at WrestleMania 38 when Stephanie McMahon introduced him to fans at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Fightful notes that WWE still has high hopes for the progression of Stevenson and his brother Damon Kemp. Since making his NXT debut at the beginning of the year, Kemp has been regularly featured as a member of the Diamond Mine faction. So there you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.